few days ago while on YouTube I came across a video posted by YouTube user 4096X entitled Annihilationists, Let's Hear It Then. I decided after watching the video to post a few comments, and eventually I was impressed to post a video response. The video was looking at the subject of hell, and the video I responded with was a video that I posted myself around 2 years ago looking at that very subject. Since then, YouTube user 4096X has responded to my response video, and this video is a response to his response video. In this video I'd like to look at some of the content of his video and share thoughts on some points that he makes. Before I do so, I'd like to thank you 4096X for taking the time to make the video and posting it. I'd like to thank you especially for the respectful way in which you deal with the content of my video. Sometimes on YouTube there's sadly a lack of respect shown from one user to another when there is a disagreement. So thank you for the respect that you have shown, and I pray that we can continue to share respectful and meaningful dialogue from now on. So as I said, I'd like to address a few of the points you make in your video. I'm not going to deal with the whole of it for time's sake, just a few of the things that I maybe disagree with. There are some things that I agree with. You make some very good points. You point out a fact, the fact being that I use 15 texts, 13 of which are Old Testament texts, and you point out a truth, which is that there are many Old Testament shadows that have a fulfillment in a New Testament reality, but you go as far as to say all of the Old Testament is a shadow of New Testament reality. Now I agree with this to a certain degree. When we have the Old Testament shadows which are fulfilled in the New Testament realities, only when the fulfillment is described in the New Testament can we fully appreciate what the shadow was attempting to teach us. I'm hoping that makes sense. Like for example, the lamb slain by the Hebrews was a shadow of Christ's sacrifice, and we fully understood the meaning of the lamb when we saw the Lamb of God slain on the cross. So that was a shadow, the lamb being slain, and the fulfillment was Christ's sacrifice. And so we can better understand what the lamb meant after reading a description of the fulfillment of the shadow, the lamb sacrifice, in the New Testament. Now, because that has already happened, the shadow has already seen its or met its reality, we can better understand the shadow. Now, although there are descriptions of the judgment of the wicked in the New Testament, because we haven't seen the fulfillment of the annihilation of the wicked, we can't fully appreciate it. Not until we see it can we fully understand it. So we have to lean upon the shadows, whether in the Old or the New Testament, to understand the event that hasn't taken place as yet. I'm hoping I'm making sense. So even the New Testament references to hell are still in essence a shadow, because there's been no fulfillment as yet. I'm hoping I'm making sense, as I've said a couple of times now. And so it's not safe to dismiss the Old Testament texts dealing with the annihilation of the wicked. You have to take them along with the New Testament texts to better understand what will eventually happen to the wicked. So that's a thought that I hope you consider. You make a statement that we interpret the Old Testament in light of the New Testament, never the other way around. Now this is something that I disagree with. In the New Testament, especially in the book of Revelation, there are symbols used. Symbols that have a connection to the Old Testament sanctuary built by Moses as described in the book of Exodus. Now, some of the symbols described in Revelation, we need the Old Testament to understand the meaning of. So we can't interpret some of the symbolism used in the book of Revelation without the Old Testament. In Revelation chapter 13 there's a beast described in verses 1 and 2, and that beast is an amalgamation of other beasts. Now if we are to understand if we are to interpret what the symbol used in Revelation 13 means, we need the book of Daniel. So I disagree with your idea that the Old Testament can never be used to interpret the New. I believe that they're interchangeable. and you have to use one at times to better understand the other, and vice versa. Something that I've looked at briefly already, you mentioned that to the Hebrew the lamb sacrifice represented the eldest son. Now I'm not too sure where you get that from, and I'm hoping that you'll give me more light to the origin, or helping me to understand the origin of that thought. To the Hebrew, the lamb pointed toward Christ and Christ alone. You go on to look at the story of Isaac and Abraham, and you kind of suggest that Isaac represented Christ. Now that's a view that I held until recently, but when you look at the story, I believe the story is contained in Genesis chapter 22. While journeying up the mountain, Isaac asks his father Abraham, well, where is the lamb? Where is the lamb sacrifice? And in Genesis 22 and verse 8 we find the answer to Isaac's question. Abraham says that God will provide a sacrifice, he'll provide a lamb. Now when you read through the story, just about the time when Abraham was about to slay his son, our Creator spoke from heaven and told him to stop. And he went on to say that, now I know. So after Abraham had basically followed the will of the Creator and even prepared himself to sacrifice his son, it was then that the father said, now I know, now I know. Now there's a great lesson in that I may deal with in another video. And then Abraham looked over and saw a sacrifice, a ram caught in a thicket. Now Isaac represents us. We are the ones that ought to have died, that ought to die, but God provides a sacrifice or a substitute, which is Christ. He is represented by the ram caught in the thicket. Isaac doesn't represent Christ, he represents us. The ram represents Christ. Now please look into that and share some thoughts in maybe a response video. So again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to make the video response. I'm hoping that the content of my video, this video, is being clear, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Until then, please pray for me, 4096X, as I pray for you.